Before you'll be able to run your first backtest using Optimized Strategy, or OMS for short, you'll need to make a number of code changes to your EA and then recompile. Just follow the instructions from step 2 here. Once you've done that, when you look at the Inputs tab in the Strategy Tester, you'll notice a number of new input parameters. Let's talk through these one by one so that you understand them all. The first parameter, Use OMS, tells your EA whether or not it should use the OMS platform. If this is set to false, no OMS code will run at all. You won't see any dashboard creation, no backtests or optimizations appearing. Set to false, for example, if you've just changed some EA code and you want to debug it, but don't want any results to be added to your R&D dashboards. But then, as soon as you start properly backtesting again, remember to set this back to true. The next two parameters are text fields that allow you to put a description of the research you're undertaking. Dashboard name allows you to enter the high-level description of the research, for example, developing and optimizing my new adaptive trend strategy. Note that if you use a new description here that you've not used before, a completely new dashboard will be created. However, if you use a description that you've used previously, then each new backtest or optimization that you run will get appended onto the end of that existing dashboard. The name that you choose for your dashboard will appear in the dashboard index here, and also at the top of your dashboard here. Next is the description field for your backtest or optimization. This allows you to provide information that will help you understand the process you took in your research when you come back to look at your dashboard again in the future. This is where this value will appear in the dashboard, here for a backtest and here for an optimization. Note that you still have a chance of changing these descriptions at a later time if you need to, or if you forgot to set it properly before you started an optimization. Just make your change and then click the Save Notes button here in the header. The next three parameters are date fields, and before I talk you through what each of these is for, I want to explain some simple backtesting best practice. Many of you will know this already, but I need to make sure that everyone does before I move on. Firstly, you should ensure that you have enough quality historical backtest data. I have both M1 and tick data for 12 years in the assets that I trade. You then need to make an intentional decision about how you'll split your available data into in-sample and out-of-sample designations. Depending on what you read or watch, you'll probably hear that a 3-to-1 ratio is about right, but you might make your own decision on this. For me, I designate 9 years for in-sample and 3 for out-of-sample. It's perfectly valid to use your in-sample data for single backtests and also for your optimizations, but you should never use your out-of-sample data for optimizations. If you do, you'll have no idea what your actual out-of-sample performance is, and therefore will have no idea of gauging what your live trading performance is likely to be. Also, you have no way of determining if you've over-optimized. So using out-of-sample data for optimizations is just a big no-no. Once you've decided on your approach, calculate the key dates and make a note of them. You'll need them in a moment for your OMS settings. Next, the general principle of using these data designations is that you perform your optimizations on the in-sample data, identify the most robust parameter values from the optimization, and then test those out on the out-of-sample data, which is often called a walk-forward backtest. You'll note I specifically said use the most robust parameter values, not use the best performing parameter values. This is a key factor in producing successful trading strategies that work in out-of-sample and live trading, and finding these most robust parameter values is what the OMS platform has been specifically designed to help you with. But more on that in other videos. There is just one exception to when these latter years can be used as part of an optimization in my view. If you followed this principle here at the top and have achieved good out-of-sample results, some traders then choose to perform what's called a pre-live optimization, using exactly the same optimization parameters they used in the first phase, and then using the most robust parameters from this to carry forward, this time not into their out-of-sample historical data, but into out-of-sample live data. The reason they do this is because they believe that the data they've performed the optimization on is more current and therefore more indicative of how price action is now behaving. Whether you perform pre-live optimizations is of course up to you, depending on what you believe. But only ever do this if you first achieved acceptable results in phase 1 at the top of the screen, keeping the out-of-sample data away from any optimizations. So with all that in mind, let's now return to the OMS settings, and you'll see we have in-sample, out-of-sample, and pre-live start dates, which you should now populate with the dates you've just calculated. An important point to note is that these do not determine the price data that's used for testing. You'll still need to set the start and end dates here in the normal way. In fact, these 3 settings don't have very much functional impact at all. All they do is automatically populate some titles in the dashboard. Let me show you a few examples. We can see here on the dashboard, this backtest was undertaken on in-sample data. This one used out-of-sample data, and you can see this optimization was also on in-sample data. The 3 settings we just saw in MT5 are what are used to determine these values. If you don't set the date fields to represent your in-sample and out-of-sample date ranges, it won't change your results in the dashboard in any way. It only affects the labels I just showed you. However, saying this, I personally find it really useful to set them and have them as a reference for when I'm switching between in-sample and out-of-sample data. I often use these dates to help me set the start and end dates here to make sure I'm being consistent and never getting any encroachment onto the out-of-sample data for optimizations. So I generally recommend using them. But of course, again, it's completely up to you. Just bear in mind that the data classifications in the dashboard will say unknown if you don't set them. The desired drawdown tolerance level here should be set based on your own personal tolerance for drawdown. It won't change the drawdown of the backtests, of course, but it will plot the tolerance line on every equity chart in the dashboard based on the value that you choose. It's the green line that you can see here, so you can instantly see if the drawdown has ever exceeded your tolerance. In the example equity chart here, that happens quite a lot, and when this happens for a profitable strategy, it tells you that your position sizing is too aggressive and you need to reduce this to help stay within tolerance. Just to give you some forward warning, this setting might move out of the EA parameters in the future and move to the settings page of the OMS dashboard application. The next 2 settings for the custom criterion and the minimum required trades for inclusion are only ever used when you perform an optimization. They don't affect backtests in the OMS dashboard, so I'm not going to cover them here. I'll explain how these are used in the separate optimization video. The final setting is used to determine if the MT5 terminal is automatically shut down after an optimization has completed. The reason for this is that an intermittent glitch in MT5 means that if you run 2 or more optimizations consecutively without a restart in between, very occasionally on-tester dinit doesn't run following the latest optimization. This in turn means that OMS is unable to get the data it needs to properly write the dashboard. Hopefully MetaQuote will fix this soon and this setting can then be removed. I'd recommend keeping it set to true though for now. We recommend running 2 initial baseline backtests using the parameters that you've been using in live trading up until this point. Firstly on your in-sample dataset and then on your out-of-sample dataset. That way you'll have 2 baselines from which to work from as you move on to optimizing using OMS to attempt to improve your out-of-sample results. Once you have all of your OMS settings and EA parameter values set how you want them, make sure the optimization setting is set to disabled, because remember you're just running a baseline backtest at the moment, and set your dates here for your in-sample data range. Then click Start. Wait for the backtest to complete and then head over to OMS, click on Dashboard Index, and you should see your first dashboard with the name you chose in the OMS settings. Click on this to go through to the actual dashboard and you should now see your first backtest Congratulations, you've just created your first OMS dashboard. Next, we recommend you run a second baseline backtest on your out-of-sample data. Once you've done that, you can move on to step 4 of the 5-step process and learn about running your first optimization.